In just a few minutes, as we conclude our Yom Kippur morning service, Cantor Norman and I will step into the ark for the great Aleinu. Unlike during every other Aleinu in our liturgy, on Yom Kippur, we will drop first to one knee, then the other, then bring our heads to the ground, and finally, our entire body will be prostrated before God. It is a humbling moment. It is a powerful moment. It is a deeply personal moment, a reminder that there is something bigger than myself in this world. It is also a voluntary act, choosing to be reminded, choosing to lie face down, choosing to submit myself to a power beyond myself comes from the privilege of being able to live a Jewish life in a free country. Hashtag Jewish privilege. Growing up, I saw myself as privileged in the sense of being really lucky. I had the privilege to go to summer camp. I had the privilege to go on some wonderful trips with my family, or because my parents afforded me that opportunity. I had the privilege to go to my first choice of university and graduate without student loans. But I have come to recognize that the definition that I have used and the privilege that I have enjoyed for so many years has a darker side. Using the dictionary definition of privilege as, quote, a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. This past summer, white nationalists created hashtag Jewish privilege to tweet anti-Semitic propaganda, Holocaust denial, and conspiracies about Jews being privileged, how we control the media, the banks, and the world. Leftist voices soon joined in, perhaps because the hashtag had co-opted the term of white privilege that's used for the social justice movement. Seemingly progressive Twitter users soon piled on with false claims about that Jews don't actually face any discrimination, while even suggesting that Jews are responsible for the discrimination and other ills that many minorities face. In mid-July, in response to this two-sided attack, Israeli writer and activist Chen Mazig kicked off a campaign in which he urged Jews on Twitter to share their personal stories to refute the hashtag Jewish privilege falsehoods being perpetuated. Within days, more than 100,000 tweets sharing family stories and personal experiences had effectively flipped the conversation. Hashtag Jewish privilege is hiding your Star of David out of fear of being targeted and attacked. Hashtag Jewish privilege is experiencing the whitewashing and erasure of our multicultural and colorful history in order to fit the narrative of anti-Jewish oppression. Hashtag Jewish privilege is looking for the exit sign in synagogues in case of an attack. Hashtag Jewish privilege is hearing it's only a joke when told that the difference between a pizza and a Jew is one doesn't scream when it's put into the oven. And yet, hashtag Jewish privilege still leaves me uncomfortable. I am worried when the right perpetuates anti-Semitic stereotypes and tropes. And I am angry when the left denies our humanity and identity by glossing over our present and past struggles and rejects us from the collective of minority groups. But my greatest discomfort comes from when we as a Jewish community recognize our victimhood, but not our responsibility. When we acknowledge our privilege, but not the need to afford others that very same privilege. Many of us grew up being taught that since white Europeans had murdered 6 million of our family members, that we were not really white, or that we had no role in American slavery and the Confederacy. Not true. Or that Jews were on the front lines of the civil rights movement. Only partially true. We have been taught that somehow, because our ancestors had lived through a few millennia of oppression, we understand it ourselves. We grew up learning about how government programs like the Land Act of 1765, the Homestead Act of 1866, the GI Bill after World War II, and Federal Housing Administration loans, how they all facilitated a rise in economic security for everyone, only to discover that everyone meant white American males, not blacks, women, or others. In an article a few months ago, Matthew Fieldman from Ohio called out the American Jewish community. Instead of thinking critically about who lost as we gained in America, we instead subscribe to the notion that we built our businesses on our own, lifting ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We were lulled into complacency by our nice houses in the suburbs and cushy recession-proof jobs. We believed that because America was founded on Judeo-Christian values, all Americans must believe in B'Tselem Elohim, that all lives matter, and our country respects people of all backgrounds. Ironically, for a people obsessed with our own historical narrative, Jews have accepted the excellence of this country without recognizing or reconciling with its horrific past. We have internalized the American myth that Jews are an ethnic minority. Since we succeeded in this country, other diverse groups should be able to as well. Sadly, the American dream for Jews has been a nightmare for Black people, and we cannot even relate. In America, we didn't have to fight legal battles for hundreds of years just to be considered a full person, a full citizen with human rights, the way African Americans did. When Black people protest, the police show up in riot gear with tear gas. When Jews show up to a rally or protest, the police wave and guide traffic. We are not seeing Jews die disproportionately as a result of COVID-19. And while we remember the singular lynching of Leo Frank, we cannot forget that African Americans have been lynched in over 800 American counties. Because we have been so warmly welcomed and integrated into this community, in no part because of our white skin, we have been lulled into complacency, enjoying our insider status instead of remaining vigilant. As a result of this acculturation and assimilation, we have forgotten the words of Rabbi Joachim Prince, spoken on the steps of the Capitol during the 1963 March on Washington. Our fathers taught us thousands of years ago that when God created man, he created him as everyone's neighbor. Neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. If #JewishPrivilege is admitting that we have indeed experienced privilege in a myriad of ways, we must take that privilege and use it for the betterment of all peoples. We must start within our very own community, where somewhere between 6 and 12% of American Jews are Jews of color. Go to Israel, and some demographers suggest that the majority of Jews in Israel are Jews of color. It is painful to acknowledge that American Jews of color are often marginalized, questioned as to the veracity of their religious identity, and made to feel unwelcome at best and a part of the maintenance crew at worst. If hashtag Jewish privilege is experiencing the whitewashing and erasure of our multicultural and colorful history in order to fit the narrative of anti-Jewish oppression, we must also accept that many Black people don't have that history, that many Black family trees stop after 4 or 5 generations due to slavery. If hashtag Jewish privilege is hiding your Star of David necklace out of fear of being targeted and attacked, we must come to terms with a Black person's inability to hide his or her race. We must be outraged when Blacks are targeted or accosted in a store with the presumption that they have come to steal something. If hashtag Jewish privilege is looking for the exit sign in a synagogue in case of an attack, it is our duty to help find exit opportunities for those who are stuck in neighborhoods that are rife with drugs and violence. If hashtag Jewish privilege is being told it is only a joke when told the difference between a pizza and a Jew is one doesn't scream when put into an oven, then our screams should be against the ovens of overcrowded and unair-conditioned prisons. We must admit that mass incarceration disproportionately affects Black and brown Americans. Mass incarceration is not a Jewish value. In fact, the only instance of incarceration in the Torah is when a corrupt Egyptian system unfairly jails Joseph as a result of the incident with Potiphar's wife, perhaps the very first unjust incarceration. If hashtag Jewish privilege is witnessing the majority of the world stay silent in the wake of anti-Jewish attacks, then we must not stand silent when those of other communities are being attacked. We have to recognize that the police, for all their good works, serving Jewish communities and the wider community, and even protecting our synagogues on Shabbatot, have, in some cases, become instruments of subjugation within Black communities. That too many times, when a Black person is prostrating himself on the ground, it is not out of personal choice, but from force, not out of humility, but out of fear. One of the areas where our privilege has benefited us the most is education. This year, we must place ourselves on a learning journey for ourselves, our multiracial community, and our collective future. We should seek to understand our own implicit biases more clearly. We want 21st century Jewish life to be the best that it can be, to fully include Jews of all races, ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientations, and gender identities. We, the Jewish community, should work for equality and justice for all people everywhere, and to reflect that commitment in our families, congregations, organizations, and philanthropic priorities. At a time of profound discord and brokenness, we know that these efforts are essential to healing our fractured democracy and building a better future for all. As the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber taught, we start with ourselves, but we do not end with ourselves.